Yo, what is going on, guys? Z Karma here, and welcome back to another Borderlands 3 video. What I have for you guys today is an Amara build video, and this build is going to be very well rounded. You're going to be able to use it for bossing, for mobbing, literally anything in the game. You can play the DLC with this, you can play the main story, you could do the takedown on solo if you have the right gear, but this build is just going to work for everything. I do want to say that I use this build without any guardian ranks, any points that I've used. Look, I have 469, never used any, and without the use of these skills that really help you a lot, this build is able to perform. So if you have some skills in here, you will make more out of this build than I do. I also wanted to say that this build works regardless of what weapons you're using. Of course, the better the weapons, the better this is going to perform. Also, the better anointments you have, the better it's going to perform. So before we get into the build and all the details, if you guys find this video helpful or informative in any way, a like rating will be greatly appreciated. And I also wanted to say that according to YouTube, about 86% of the people that watch my videos are not subscribed. So if you enjoy the content and you want to hit that sub button for me, that'll be awesome, and thank you. So anyways, without further ado, let's just get straight into the skill tree. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the whole skill tree just like that for any people that just want to see the skill tree. So I'm just going to go through it. After that, I will talk about weapons, equipment, and stuff that I recommend you take. And once I'm done with that, I will add some gameplay in the background and go more into detail on the skills for anyone interested. So we're going to start off with the red tree. And for this red tree, we're going to max out Anima, Tempest. We are going to max out Steady Hands. We're going to get 2 points into Wildfire. We're going to get Dread, Deep Well. 3 points into Indiscriminate. 2 into Sustainment. And that's it. Then we're going to go to the Mystical Assault tree, which is the blue tree. And we're going to start off by maxing out Do Harm and getting 1 point into Violent Tapestry. Then we will put 1 point into Alacrity, then 3 points into Transcend, and max out Restless. Once you do that, you want to max out From Rest, and this is my choice, by the way. This is your option. If you're using weapons that don't require faster charge rate or fire rate, then you can feel free to add those points to Alacrity or Fast Hands, or maybe even Awakening, because this perk is really good with Ties That Bind. So if you want to use Awakening for Ties That Bind, that's completely up to you. But I like to put my points into From Rest because I use a lot of weapons that require charge time and have slow fire rate. So anyways, that would be like your only option to switch around in my opinion. So let's just move on. Then I'll put 3 points into Laid Bare, 3 into Wrath, 1 into Remnant, and your last point into Avatar. As for the action skills, that is completely up to you. Obviously, if you're mobbing, I recommend 100% just use Ties That Bind. Ties That Bind, basically, you grasp an enemy. Whenever you grasp an enemy, nearby targets are linked, and any damage dealt to a linked target is shared between all other linked targets. So whatever you do of damage to one of the linked targets, 35% of that damage is going to be sent to every other enemy. So basically, the more weapon damage you do, the more damage is going to be shared, and the best thing about Ties That Bind is that that shared damage, even though it comes from your weapon, is considered action skill damage. So Do Harm will give you a huge bonus, which we'll talk about later. And as for bossing, if you have a weapon that gives you 250% on Phase Cast, you might as well use Phase Cast. If you have a 300% weapon on Phase Slam, you go ahead and use Phase Slam. Now, if you don't have either, and you're using Laid Bare like we're using here, with this skill, whenever you damage an enemy with your action skill, they take 25% extra damage for 8 seconds. So in this case, if you don't have either of those anointments, make sure you use Phase Cast so you can damage that boss enemy with Phase Cast and you can take advantage of this. Obviously, you can also damage the enemies with Phase Slam, but for enemies like the Grave Ward, you're not going to be able to do so. Now let's talk about the weapons real quick. So weapons choices, that's completely up to you. Right now I have these two because I was farming a boss, 300% on Phase Slam and just 50% extra shock damage. I was also using this ion cannon, which is very good. It does a ton of damage. And this one I have is just ridiculous. It's an Annex cannon with 300% on Phase Slam, just so much damage. And I'm also using this Unforgiven, which basically just gives me 384% extra critical hit damage, and I just do the crit swap method sometimes whenever it's viable. Weapons that I recommend, like always, the Nighthawk is very good. This one that gives me 50% extra cryo is awesome. You can use a Maggie. The Maggie is very good for mobbing, guys. Like, you can literally just grasp an enemy and then shoot him in the head, and by the time that enemy dies, most of the linked targets are already dead, because this weapon does so much damage. And additionally, with the indiscriminate, those shots are being ricocheted to nearby enemies as well. Other options are the Dictator. Of course, the Dictator is very good, especially when you got some nice anointments. And finally, I want to talk about the Brainstormer. This weapon should be your go-to weapon for mobbing with Amara. This is very good. Basically, the Brainstormer, whenever you shoot an enemy, it has a chance to create some lightning effects that will do damage over time to enemies, and let me tell you, it absolutely shreds mobs. Right here I have a catch infused Brainstormer, which is a ×7. The best one to use is a redundant Brainstormer, but I will say that that one burns through ammo, so if you're having ammo problems, you might as well switch to a ×7 instead of a ×14, which is still very good. It's just going to do a little bit less damage. And now let's just get into the shield, the class mod, and the grenade. Well, the shield, I always use transformers, you guys know that, but you can use a stopgap. You can use anything you want that you like using. You can go ahead and use it. Just make sure to get these anointments on action skill and gain bonus elemental damage with weapons for 10 seconds. This is just going to make your life a whole ton easier. We just explained that Amara's elemental damage is the best thing about her, so just adding on top of that, it's going to make her even better. For the class mod, we are using the Phasezerker. Phasezerker is very important because whenever you activate your action skill, you gain your max rush stack count, which is going to be 25. And for every rush stack, you'll get increased weapon damage and increased action skill cooldown rate. And for the grenade, once again, it depends on what you want to use, but always make sure to get the anointment that gives you bonus elemental on action skill end. And for the artifact, you want to use an elemental projector victory rush. With the elemental projector, whenever you're bossing, you can use a sellout pistol to shoot yourself in the foot to get that bonus elemental damage of 90% whenever you damage yourself with the same element. And the victory rush is just a no-brainer. Whenever you kill a badass, you trigger victory rush, which will give you 18% movement speed and damage for 60 seconds. Now, these 60 seconds, by the time these run out, you already killed another badass enemy, so you'll basically have these bonuses all the time. Now enjoy the gameplay in the background and let's get straight into the skills. So Anima, Tempest, and Wildfire are going to be your elemental powerhouse perks. Amara's boost to her elemental damage has a huge impact on her performance, like I've been saying. With Anima, your status effects will deal more damage and last longer, so whenever you apply a dot on an enemy, it will do a ton more damage. Dot is damage over time for those people that don't know. So this perk is especially good with weapons with high dot damage like the Cutsman, the Ion Cannon, the Kill-o-the-Wisp, amongst others. Tempest will help you deal bonus elemental damage. You'll get 30% extra damage, and shock damage will have an extra 20% on top of that. Elemental damage in this game is so good because elemental damage is multiplied by the overall damage after all weapon damage bonuses are applied. So this is why anointments with 250% extra damage and 300% bonus damage after face slam perform even better when paired with skills like Tempest. And with Wildfire, status effects will have a chance to spread to nearby enemies, so your dot damage will be increased even more. Moving on, we have Dread. With this skill, you will get an extra gun damage when grasping an enemy. Your guns will gain 50% bonus damage, and every time you kill an enemy that is grasped, your weapon will be instantly reloaded. Next, we have Indiscriminate. With this skill, there will be a chance for bullets to ricochet to nearby enemies, and if you're shooting an enemy that is currently grasped, that ricochet chance will be increased even further. You might not notice this most of the time, but a lot of enemies that are not in your line of sight will actually die thanks to this ricocheted shots. Now let's talk about Deep Well. Well, with Deep Well, you will get an increase in magazine size on all elemental weapons. This increase in magazine size will give you a lot more DPS as it will allow you to reload less, and it will also give you a few more shots in order to get your weapon instantly reloaded with Dread. This skill works especially well on elemental weapons that have small magazine sizes, so if you find a good weapon that you like with an unfortunate small magazine size, this skill will make up for that. Then we have Sustainment. This is your only lifeline with Amara. 2 points on this skill will be enough. It will grant you 8% lifesteal when damaging enemies with elemental damage. That is why it is very important to maximize your elemental damage with skills like Tempest and Anima. As long as you're doing damage, you will survive even a barrage of rockets from the COV. Now this is going to be a little bit more detailed. Do Harm and Violent Tapestry will provide you with the ability to get rush stacks. Do Harm will grant you a rush stacks every time you kill an enemy. Activating your action skill will consume all rush stacks, and once you consume your rush stacks, you will get 4.5% extra action skill damage for every stack of rush consumed. Since we will be using a Phasezerker class mod which gives us 5 extra rush stacks and Avatar which gives you 10 more, we will get 25 rush stacks in total, giving us 112.5% extra action skill damage. This works especially well when using Ties That Bind as your action skill because the damage that is shared with the links created is considered action skill damage. So the more damage you are doing with your weapons, the greater the bonus from Do Harm will be. As for Violent Tapestry, this skill will grant you rush stacks when you apply a status effect to an enemy, and for every stack of rush consumed, your status effects chance will be increased. A lot of people overlook this skill, but it can help you freeze enemies a lot faster and also allow you to apply dot damage most of the time. Next we have Alacrity. This skill is for some extra reload speed. It also relies on rush stacks as a reload speed will be increased based on the number of rush stacks consumed. Next up we have Transcend. This skill is activated when you activate your action skill. Your accuracy and critical hit damage will be increased. This works better on boss enemies as that extra critical hit damage can get those faster farm times that you're after. It can also work while mobbing. If you're using weapons like the Maggie where headshots do insane damage, this is definitely going to help. Next up we have Restless. This skill will increase your action skill cooldown rate by 25%. This is so important because the more often that you can use your action skill, the better. Especially now that the meta is having anointments that require you to use your action skill, and there's also many skills in our skill trees that rely on action skill use. Next up we have From Rest. Now I mentioned it earlier and this skill is completely up to you. I would only recommend this if you're using weapons with charge time and slow fire rate. It just makes weapons like the Cutsman or the Lenoge perform even better. But if you don't need a faster fire rate, you can always spec into Alacrity or Awakening. Late Bear will cause enemies to take increased damage from all sources. When you damage an enemy with your action skill, they will take 25% extra damage. This works perfectly with both bossing and mobbing with Ties That Bind. In bossing, you can use Phase Cast to damage a boss with Phase Cast and then get that damage increase of 25%. And when you're using Ties That Bind on mobs, all those enemies that have been linked by those Ties That Bind will be taking action skill damage and therefore take an increase of 25% extra damage. Moving on to Wrath. With this skill, Amara's gun damage will be increased by 20%, and when you activate your action skill, you will get an additional 20%. So this skill alone will give you 40% extra weapon damage, which is absolutely huge. So in my opinion, this skill is a must if you want to maximize your damage output. Next up, we have Remnant. This skill will create a homing projectile when you kill an enemy with a gun or your action skill. The thing that makes this so good is that any overkill damage is added to the projectile's damage. What this means is if your kill shot to the enemy does more damage than you actually need for that enemy to die, that extra damage will be applied to the enemy that the homing projectile hits. So I don't know if you've seen this from other people, but basically this works extremely well with weapons with high damage like the Cutsman or the ion cannon, so definitely take Remnant. And finally, we got Avatar. This skill is insane. It is basically a game changer. With this skill, you will be able to activate your action skill while it's on cooldown. So if you need your action skill but it's not ready, you will have the option to do so. Additionally, you will get 10 extra rush stacks, giving you a max rush stack count of 25. Do Harm will give you a ton more damage thanks to this skill, and Alacrity will also give you a lot more reload speed. So yeah guys, that is the build, and these are all the skills that we have. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, this build will perform in any situation in the game. It is very well rounded, and the only difference in performance will come down to your weapon choices and the anointments that you have. I hope you guys find this video helpful in some way. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more Borderlands 3 content. Hope you all have a good rest of your day, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.